I stood in the freezing November rain, staring at the screen door of the house I grew up in. Inside, the dining room was glowing with warmth, the laughter of my family echoing through the glass. My mother was floating around the dining table, adjusting the crystal glasses and smoothing out the linen. I counted the chairs through the window. 1, 2, 3, exactly 8 seats, perfectly arranged for my siblings, their spouses, and my mother's favorite family friends. Then, my eyes drifted down to the cold concrete of the porch step. There, sitting right next to the muddy doormat, was a single paper plate covered in aluminum foil, with a plastic fork taped to the top. A sticky note in my mother's elegant handwriting read, "Didn't want your work clothes ruining the dining chairs. Happy Thanksgiving." That was the day they decided I wasn't part of the family. But they didn't know I'd remember. My name is Chloe. I'm 26 years old, and if there is one thing I have learned in my life, it's that blood doesn't always mean family. Today, I work as an architectural designer, a career built on calculating structures, stability, and foundations. I spent years learning how to build strong walls because, for the first 2 decades of my life, the foundation beneath my own feet was entirely fractured. Growing up, I was the designated outsider in my own home. While my siblings were handed cars, college tuition, and unconditional praise, I was the one who had to work 2 retail jobs just to pay for my own textbooks and tuition. I was viewed not as a daughter, but as a minor inconvenience that my mother had to tolerate. The tipping point came exactly 7 years ago. It was Thanksgiving night, and I had just pulled a grueling 12-hour shift at a local clothing boutique to earn time-and-a-half pay. I was exhausted, my feet were throbbing, and my stomach was completely empty. But as I drove to my mother's house, I felt a small flicker of hope. I thought that maybe, just for one night, the holiday spirit would soften her heart. I parked my beat-up car in the driveway and walked up the steps, carrying the heavy scent of retail sweat and cheap perfume on my clothes. Through the window, the scene was picture-perfect. The dining table was a masterpiece of crystal and porcelain, bathed in the golden, ambient glow of the chandelier. 8 chairs were drawn close, occupied by my mother, my siblings, and their wealthy friends, all sharing a massive roasted turkey and laughing merrily. But when I reached for the front doorknob, I found it locked. And then, my eyes drifted downward. There, sitting directly on the cold, damp concrete next to a muddy doormat, was a single paper plate covered tightly in aluminum foil. Taped to the top was a plastic fork and a neon sticky note. In my mother's elegant script it read, "Didn't want your work clothes ruining the dining chairs. Happy Thanksgiving." I didn't knock. I just stood there in the cold, realizing that my seat at their table never existed. That paper plate on the damp concrete became the catalyst for the rest of my life. As I drove away from my mother's house that Thanksgiving night, tears blurred my vision, but beneath the intense heartache, a cold, unwavering determination took root. I realized that as long as I kept seeking their validation, I would always be left out in the cold. So, I made a silent vow to myself. I would never ask them for a single thing again. I completely stopped showing up to family gatherings where I was treated like an afterthought. I poured every ounce of my remaining energy, anger, and grief into my studies and my career, working late into the night until my sketches were flawless and my grades were perfect. My sister, Maya, lived a completely different reality. She was the family's golden child, a title she wore with effortless entitlement. While I was tracking pennies to afford groceries, Maya was given a brand new crossover SUV for her 20th birthday. When she decided she wanted to pursue a degree in art history, my mother gleefully paid her full tuition, rent, and a monthly allowance so Maya could focus on her creative soul. Maya didn't have to work a single day in her life. Her only job was to be the perfect reflection of our mother's vanity. They would go on lavish spa weekends and shopping trips together, posting pictures online with captions about their unbreakable bond, entirely erasing the fact that they had a second daughter and sister living just a few miles away. But while Maya was busy spending money she hadn't earned, I was quietly building an unshakable foundation. After graduating near the top of my class, I landed a position at a prestigious architectural design firm. Within 5 years, my dedication paid off. I secured major corporate clients, earned 3 promotions, and began building a substantial financial portfolio. I bought a beautiful, mid-century modern home of my own, a sanctuary filled with warmth, light, and a dining table with enough beautiful wooden chairs to seat anyone I chose. I had completely cut contact with my toxic family, changing my number and blocking their social media accounts. For 7 full years, I lived in peaceful silence, believing I had finally outrun the shadow of that lonely front porch. The peaceful silence I had built over 7 years shattered on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my drafting table, meticulously reviewing the blueprints for a new commercial complex, when my office phone rang. Because it was a direct line usually reserved for high-priority corporate clients, I picked it up without hesitation, expecting to hear a contractor's voice. Instead, the sound that traveled through the receiver immediately caused my hands to freeze over the blueprints. It was the sound of heavy, ragged breathing, followed by a sharp, desperate sob. Before I could even ask who was on the line, a trembling voice spoke my name. "Chloe? Please don't hang up. It's Maya." My heart hammered against my ribs, a sudden rush of old adrenaline flooding my system. Hearing my sister's voice after nearly a decade of total estrangement felt entirely surreal. My first instinct was to press the flash button and disconnect the call, protecting the quiet, stable life I had fought so hard to create. But curiosity, mixed with a lingering trace of old family programming, held my finger back. Maya didn't wait for me to respond. She began speaking in a panicked, breathless rush, her words tumbling over one another as she wept openly into the phone. She told me that she had tracked down my office number through an old college acquaintance who worked in the same industry. She sounded completely broken, stripped entirely of the effortless, golden child arrogance she had carried during our youth. "Chloe, everything is falling apart," she begged, her voice cracking under the weight of genuine terror. "Mom is losing it, and I don't know what to do. The family is facing an absolute crisis, and you're the only one who can help us. Please, I am begging you, just meet me for a few minutes. I need my sister." Against my better judgment, I gave her the address of a quiet cafe down the street. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived, save for the rhythmic hum of the espresso machine and the soft patter of rain against the glass. I spotted Maya sitting in a corner booth. The girl who used to look like a walking fashion magazine now looked utterly exhausted. Her designer handbag was scuffed, her hair was tied back hastily, and the skin around her eyes was red and swollen. When she looked up and saw me, a flicker of profound relief crossed her face, and she immediately reached across the table, trying to grasp my hands. I quietly placed my laptop bag on the seat, avoiding her touch, and sat down. "Thank you for coming, Chloe," she whispered, her voice still thick with emotion. I ordered a black coffee, keeping my expression perfectly neutral. "You said there was a crisis, Maya. What's going on?" The truth spilled out of her like water from a broken dam. The grand family facade had completely rotted from the inside out. For years, our mother had been funding their lavish lifestyles by taking out predatory loans against the family business and refinancing the childhood home. Maya's creative consulting career had never made a single dime. It was entirely subsidized by our mother's mounting debt. Now, the house cards had collapsed. The business was facing forced liquidation, banks were initiating foreclosure proceedings on the house, and to make matters worse, Maya's upcoming luxury wedding was completely broke with vendors threatening to sue. "We found out about your firm, Chloe. We saw the architectural awards you won online," Maya pleaded, leaning forward, her eyes wide with desperate expectation. "You're making so much money now. Mom is facing homelessness, and my wedding will be ruined. We just need you to sign as a guarantor on a consolidation loan and help cover the immediate debts. You're the only one with the credit and the capital to save the family." I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch between us. They didn't want a sister. They wanted a bank. I didn't give Maya an answer at the cafe. I simply told her I would think about it, leaving her with the bill for our coffees. 2 days later, an elegant, heavy linen envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a lavish, gold-embossed invitation to a private dining room at the city's most expensive French restaurant, scheduled for the following evening. Tucked inside the fold was a short, handwritten note from my mother. The tight, patronizing script I had feared for decades had completely transformed into a shaky, desperate plea. Dearest Chloe, time has passed, and mistakes were made. Let us put the past behind us. I want nothing more than to sit down together as a full family and finally give you your rightful seat at the table. It was a masterclass in manipulation. After 7 years of total emotional abandonment, my sudden worth to them was wrapped entirely in the dollar signs attached to my name. They thought a flashy restaurant and a few sweet words would make me forget the years of neglect. They assumed that a girl who had been starved of affection her entire life would instantly crumble the moment she was finally offered a crumb of inclusion. I stared at the gold lettering on the invitation, feeling a strange mix of amusement and profound clarity. The old Chloe, the hurt, vulnerable teenager who wept on a cold porch step, might have fallen for this trap. She might have run into their arms, desperate to prove her value. But the 26-year-old woman sitting in her own architectural firm knew exactly who she was. I didn't need their validation anymore, and I certainly didn't need their permission to sit at a table. But as I texted Maya to confirm that I would attend the dinner, a cold smile touched my lips. I was going to accept their invitation, but it wasn't to save them. It was to finally close the door on them forever. The private dining room at the restaurant was the epitome of luxury, smelling of rich truffles and expensive wine. When I walked in, my mother and Maya practically flew out of their plush velvet chairs to greet me. For the first time in my life, my mother hugged me tightly, her voice dripping with artificial warmth as she complimented my designer coat. They ushered me to the center seat of the table, treating me like royalty. The waiters poured expensive champagne, and my mother immediately began a rehearsed speech about how proud she had always been of my quiet independence, and how thrilled she was to have her brilliant daughter back, where I belonged. I let them talk. I sat through the appetizers, watching them spin their web of compliments, waiting for the inevitable moment the trap would snap shut. It didn't take long. As soon as the main courses were cleared, my mother reached into her bag and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents, sliding them across the white tablecloth toward me. Chloe, sweetie, as family, we have to look out for each other, she said, her eyes wide with manufactured innocence. These are just the loan consolidation papers Maya mentioned. If you could just sign the guarantor lines, we can finally put all this stress behind us and be a real family again. I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, I opened my briefcase, pulled out a document of my own, and placed it directly over her paperwork. It was a formal, legally binding cease and desist letter drafted by my firm's attorneys, explicitly stating that any further contact from them would be treated as harassment. Maya gasped, and the fake smile instantly vanished from my mother's face, replaced by a mask of cold fury. "What is the meaning of this, Chloe?" she hissed. "After everything we've done to welcome you tonight, you're rejecting your own family?" I stood up slowly, looking down at the two women who had spent my entire youth making me feel worthless. "You didn't invite me here because you love me," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet room like ice. "You invited me because your luxury lifestyle is collapsing. 7 years ago, you left my Thanksgiving dinner wrapped in tin foil on a cold, wet porch because you didn't want my hard work ruining your precious dining chairs. Well, my hard work built a life you will never be a part of. You wanted to give me a seat at your table, but the truth is, I own the building now. Keep the papers. You're going to need them for the foreclosure." I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving them to face the check. Walking out of that restaurant felt like shedding a weight I had been carrying for 26 years. The cool evening air hit my face, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely light. I didn't look back to see their expressions, nor did I check my phone when it inevitably began to buzz with frantic notifications. I simply got into my car, drove back to my mid-century modern home, and poured myself a quiet glass of wine. The illusion of their power over me was entirely gone. They were no longer the intimidating figures of my childhood. They were just two desperate people facing the consequences of a lifetime of vanity, greed, and poor choices. In the months that followed, the consequences of their actions unfolded exactly as the legal documents predicted. Unable to secure a guarantor, my mother lost the family business to liquidation, and the childhood home went into foreclosure. Maya's lavish wedding was canceled, replaced by a quiet courthouse ceremony that she could actually afford. They had to downsize their lives dramatically, moving into a modest rented apartment and finally learning the value of a dollar earned through actual labor. They tried reaching out through mutual acquaintances a few times, spinning a narrative of betrayal, but the firm boundaries set by my attorneys kept them at a permanent distance. As for me, my life continued to expand in beautiful, stable directions. The Floyd Whitaker Foundation for Financial Justice thrived, allowing me to use my resources to help other women rebuild their foundations after facing severe emotional and financial manipulation. Sitting at the dining table in my own home, surrounded by friends who loved me for exactly who I was, I finally understood what true family meant. It wasn't defined by the blood in your veins, but by the respect, love, and safety you chose to cultivate. I had built my own seat at a much better table.